On August 17, 1943, Oberleutnant Otto Wenger, a 20-kill ace of Jagdgeschwader II, balanced his Focke-Wulf 190 on its propeller, climbing with a brutal, earth-shattering power. Below him, the tiny green and brown squares of occupied France gave way to the deep, hostile blue of the English Channel. His Staffel was rising to meet the latest American incursion. Wenger loved this plane. He didn't just fly it, he wore it. It was, in his mind, a perfect extension of his will. He loved the way its BMW 801 radial engine thrummed with power, the way its controls responded instantly, the way his 4 20mm cannons could shred a Spitfire in a 1-second burst. Today, however, the targets were not Spitfires. They were the new American bombers, the B-17s, and their clumsy, oversized escorts. He spotted them at 24,000 feet, a vast formation of bombers, surrounded by a swarm of what he mockingly called jugs, the P-47 Thunderbolt. Wenger almost laughed. He had fought these before. They were fat, heavy, and slow. They wallowed in the sky, unable to turn, unable to climb. They were, in his opinion, flying coffins, a pathetic attempt by the Americans to challenge the masters of the sky. He selected his target, a P-47 lagging at the edge of the formation. He rolled his 190 inverted, a beautiful, crisp maneuver, and dove. He was a hawk striking a pig. The P-47 pilot, a rookie, never saw him coming. Wenger came screaming in from the American 6 o'clock high, his speed building effortlessly. The P-47 loomed in his gun sight. He pressed the triggers. The FW-190 shuddered as its cannons erupted. The P-47's tail section simply disintegrated. It vanished in a cloud of metal confetti and fire, and the massive fighter tumbled end over end, beginning its long, final journey to the earth. Wenger pulled up, a clean, professional kill, and scanned for his next victim. But there was something wrong. The other P-47s, they weren't turning to fight. They were diving, all of them. They were running away, plunging in a desperate, panicked dive toward the earth. Cowards, Wenger spat into his radio. They run like frightened old women. He was triumphant, but as he regrouped with his Staffel, he felt a prickle of unease. They had shot down several, but the Americans had simply dived away, at speeds he couldn't believe, and vanished. That evening, at his airbase near Paris, Wenger was celebrating his 21st victory with brandy. But his commander, a grizzled veteran of the Battle of Britain named Major Elias Kessel, was grim. "They lost 60 bombers over Schweinfurt today, Otto," Kessel murmured, staring into his glass. "A great victory. But they will be back tomorrow, and the day after, and those dumb cops and the jugs you find so amusing, they are learning something. They are running, yes, but they are not panicking. They are running to a place we cannot follow, and they are luring us there." Wenger stopped, his glass halfway to his lips. "What do you mean, Herr Major? Lure us where? It's the worst fighter they have." Kessel looked at him, his eyes cold. "It is the worst, Otto. Until it isn't." How could this perfect German weapon, the Würger or butcher bird that had terrorized the legendary Spitfire and now dominated the skies of Europe, be systematically dismantled by a plane that its own pilots called a flying milk bottle? The answer wasn't a new weapon. It was a new tactic, born of desperation. A tactic that would turn the P-47's greatest weaknesses into its most lethal strengths. And it would all happen in the one place the Focke-Wulf 190 could not fight. The thin, frozen air, 3 miles above the earth. To understand the arrogance of a pilot like Otto Wenger, we must go back to 1941. The British Royal Air Force, having just survived the Battle of Britain, was confident. Their new Spitfire Mark V was, they believed, the finest fighter plane in the world. It was agile, fast, and had defeated the Messerschmitt 109. But in August of 1941, the RAF began to hear whispers, then frantic reports. A new German fighter had appeared over the channel. It was a radial engine machine, blunt-nosed and aggressive, and it was unstoppable. This was the Focke-Wulf 190. Its arrival was not an evolution, it was a revolution. It was a shock, a moment of pure technological terror for the Allies. The FW-190 was, in almost every way, superior to the Spitfire V. It was faster at all but the highest altitudes. It could outclimb it. Its roll rate was phenomenal, so fast that British pilots in their first encounters would report that the 190 could disappear in the blink of an eye, simply by rolling and diving. And its armament was terrifying. While the Spitfire carried a mix of machine guns and 20mm cannons, the 190 was a flying gun platform, most armed with 4 20mm cannons and 2 machine guns. It didn't just shoot planes down, it shredded them. British ace Al Deer, a 17-kill veteran, said, "This FW-190 is a quantum leap. It's got everything. Whew. Speed, climb, maneuverability, and a cannon punch that is unbelievable." The FW-190 was, by all accounts, the perfect tactical fighter. And now, in 1943, it was the primary weapon defending the Reich from the new American daylight bombing campaign. Into this hornet's nest came the Americans, and they weren't flying Spitfires. The primary escort fighter for the U.S. 8th Air Force was the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, and on paper it was a joke. The FW-190 was a sleek, 1,700 horsepower athlete, weighing just under 9,000 pounds. The P-47 was a 2,000 horsepower beast that could weigh up to 14,000 pounds, 7 tons. It was, literally, almost twice as heavy as the 190. It was the largest and heaviest single-engine fighter of the war. Its pilots, upon first seeing it, were horrified. They nicknamed it the Juggernaut, or the Jug, or, less charitably, the Flying Milk Bottle, for its portly, ungraceful shape. One of the men assigned to fly this monster was a young, fiercely ambitious pilot named Francis Gabby Gabreski. The son of Polish immigrants, Gabreski flew with a cold, analytical fury. He was assigned to the 56th Fighter Group, commanded by another brilliant, hard-nosed tactician named Colonel Hubert Hub Zemke. Together they formed the core of what would become Zemke's Wolf Pack. And in their first few months of combat, they were getting hammered. The P-47 was, at the mid-altitudes where most dogfights happened, a terrible aircraft. Its climb rate was pathetic. Its acceleration was sluggish. A lightweight FW-190 could, as Otto Wenger had demonstrated, run circles around it. The Germans loved fighting it. They could dive from above, make a slashing cannon attack, and then use their superior climb and acceleration to rocket back up, leaving the jugs wallowing, unable to follow. The American strategy of high-altitude daylight bombing was on the verge of collapse. The B-17s were being slaughtered because their escorts couldn't protect them. The mighty 8th was bleeding to death. But Zemke and Gabby Gabreski were not just pilots, they were analysts. They were hunters. Back at their base in England, in smoky, tense debriefing rooms, they didn't just complain. They studied. They pored over the combat reports, looking for a pattern, any weakness they could exploit. And they found one. A small, strange, counterintuitive clue. The FW-190, they noted, was a demon below 20,000 feet. It was untouchable. But the few rare combat reports from engagements above 25,000 feet told a different story. In these fleeting encounters, the P-47s seemed different. They were able to hold their own. One pilot reported, "I was at 28,000 feet. A 190 came at me. I turned, and I stayed with him. He couldn't shake me." This was the thread. Zemke and Gabreski pulled on it, and in doing so, they unraveled the entire perfection of the FW-190. They had discovered its fatal flaw. The flaw was not in the FW-190's design. It was in its engine. The Focke-Wulf 190 was powered by the magnificent BMW 801, a 14-cylinder air-cooled radial engine. It was a masterpiece of German engineering, powerful, compact, and robust. But to make an engine work in the thin air of high altitude, it needs a supercharger, a device that force-feeds compressed air into the cylinders. The BMW 801 used a brilliant but simple supercharger. It was a single-stage, two-speed, gear-driven system. What does that mean? It means the supercharger was connected directly to the engine by gears. It had a low gear for low altitude and a high gear for mid-altitude. This system was incredibly efficient and gave the FW-190 its spectacular performance, up to about 22,000 feet. But above that altitude, in the truly thin, cold air, this perfect system collapsed. The single-stage supercharger, even in its high gear, simply could not cram enough air into the engine. The BMW 801's horsepower, its very lifeblood, would begin to drop off, and drop off dramatically. The FW-190, the butcher bird, began to suffocate. It became sluggish. Its controls grew heavy. Its blistering roll rate slowed. It was gasping for breath. Now, look at the inferior American plane, the P-47. This 7-ton beast was built around its own power plant, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, a fantastic engine. But the R2800 was only half the story. The real secret of the P-47, the accidental masterpiece hidden inside its massive, bulky fuselage, was its turbosupercharger. The P-47 wasn't heavy because it was poorly designed. It was heavy because it had to house a massive, incredibly complex General Electric turbosupercharger system, a maze of ductwork that ran from the engine back to a turbine wheel in the tail of the aircraft, and then all the way back to the engine. Unlike the FW-190's gear-driven supercharger, the P-47's turbo was spun by the engine's exhaust gases. This was a finicky, complex, and often difficult-to-maintain system. But it had one war-winning advantage. It loved thin air. The higher the P-47 went, the faster the turbo spun, automatically compensating for the lack of air pressure. At 30,000 feet, an altitude where the perfect FW-190 was suffocating and its performance was collapsing, the P-47's R280 engine was still developing its full 2,000 horsepower. The P-47 wasn't just good at high altitude, it was a monster. It became faster than the FW-190. It could outclimb the FW-190. Its controls remained light and responsive. At 30,000 feet, the P-47, the flying milk bottle, was the most dangerous plane in the sky. And then there was the industrial might theme. The FW-190, with its cannons, was designed to destroy a plane in one pass. German pilots were shocked when this didn't work on the P-47. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a P-47 ace, was on a mission when he was ambushed by a FW-190. His plane was shredded. 21 20mm cannon shells and over 200 machine gun bullets tore through his airframe. His canopy was shot away. His hydraulic system was gone. His right rudder pedal was shot off. He was wounded. And the plane kept flying. The P-47 was built like a flying tank. Its rugged, simple construction and its massive radial engine could absorb a horrifying amount of punishment and still bring its pilot home. This was a psychological blow the Germans were not prepared for. They would hit a P-47 with a perfect burst, see parts fly off it, and the Jug would just ignore them and fly away. This ruggedness gave the P-47 pilots a confidence, an arrogance that was almost suicidal. They knew their plane could take a beating. And this led Zemke, Gabreski, and the 56th Fighter Group to develop their new lethal doctrine. It was simple and it was brilliant. Rule number 1, you never, ever engage a Focke-Wulf 190 in a turning fight below 20,000 feet. You will lose. Rule number 2, if a 190 jumps you, do not try to turn. Do not try to run. You dive. Your 7-ton Jug is a brick, and a brick falls faster than a feather. The P-47 could dive at speeds approaching the sound barrier, faster than any plane in the German arsenal. You dive, you build up a massive, uncatchable speed, and you escape. Rule number 3, and this was the genius. You use that dive speed to climb. You zoom climb back up, back to your hunting ground, back to the thin, cold air above 25,000 feet. And rule number 4, you lure the bastards upstairs. You bait the arrogant German aces, men like Otto Wenger, who believe you are cowards, into following you. You lure them up out of their element and into yours. You force them to fight you in the one place in the sky where their perfect fighter is a useless, suffocating pig. The climax of this new strategy came in the brutal air battles of late 1943 and early 1944. Let's return to our two pilots. It is now March 1944. Gabby Gabreski is an ace, a master of his craft. Otto Wenger is also an ace, but he is frustrated. The Americans are getting harder to kill. He is leading his staffel of FW-190s to intercept a B-17 box headed for Berlin. The escort is a high-cover squadron of P-47s from the 56th, Gabreski's group. They are at 28,000 feet. Wenger and his pilots climb to meet them, but this time, they are already at the edge of their 190's performance. The air is thin. Their engines are straining. "Engage the Jugs!" Wenger orders, and his squadron breaks to attack. But something is wrong. The P-47s are not slow. They are not clumsy. Gabreski sees the 190s coming from below. "Wolfpack, break and hit 'em," he calls, his voice calm. The P-47s, in their element, roll over and dive. They are faster than the 190s. Wenger is horrified. He sees a P-47 flash past him, then pull up in a climb that his own 190 cannot possibly match. He tries to get on its tail, pulling his stick back, and his FW-190 shudders. It's sluggish. It's not responding. The controls feel like they're set in concrete. He is fighting a plane that cannot breathe. "Brake! Brake!" he screams. "Dive! Dive!" But it's too late. Gabreski, having completed his dive, has converted his speed back into altitude, coming up from below and behind Wenger's wingman. The German pilot, fighting his mushy, unresponsive controls, can't react. Gabreski's 8.50 caliber machine guns, a buzzsaw of lead, rip into the FW-190's belly. The plane ignites, a fireball in the frozen sky. Wenger, his arrogance shattered, can only watch. He turns to run, diving for the thick, safe air below. But two more P-47s are on him. They are toying with him. They are above him, beside him, faster, more agile. This inferior American plane, this flying milk bottle, has become a pack of wolves. Wenger dives, his engines screaming, his only thought to escape. He makes it, barely, his plane shot full of holes, his confidence, and the myth of the FW-190's perfection shattered forever. He lands, his hands shaking, finally understanding what his major had meant. The Americans had lured him to a place he couldn't fight. They had discovered the FW-190's fatal flaw. The Focke-Wulf 190 was, arguably, the finest tactical fighter of the Second World War. It was a masterpiece of engineering, a thoroughbred racehorse designed for a short, brutal, mid-altitude fight. But the air war over Germany was not a tactical dogfight. It was a high-altitude, strategic, grinding war of attrition. It wasn't fought at 15,000 feet. It was fought at 30,000 feet, in the frozen, contrail-laced highways of the bomber streams. The Germans had built the perfect weapon for the wrong war. The Americans, in their pragmatic, brute force industrial way, had built a 7-ton monster that could breathe in space. And in the cold, thin air of the Third Reich, the monster, not the thoroughbred, would become the king. The tactics developed by Gabreski and Zemke, born from a desperate study of a single fatal flaw, had not only saved the P-47, they had saved the entire daylight bombing campaign. They had forced the Luftwaffe into a fight, at an altitude they could not win, against an aircraft that was not only a better fighter in that environment, but was also being built by the thousands. It was the beginning of the end for the Luftwaffe, a defeat delivered not by a better plane, but by a better strategy.